How do you know if you have trauma? Let's talk about it. Hey, you guys, I'm Kobe. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I almost said, I don't even know, podcast, but welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to talk about how to know if you have trauma. If you don't know, I am a trauma therapist. I specialize in EMDR and experiential modalities, and I help people heal from their past so they can live lives that they love. And I'm going to help you kind of figure out, okay, I know I've been through some stuff, but did it count as trauma? Is it trauma? Like, what does that mean, right? So first, let's define what trauma is. My definition of trauma, there are many definitions of trauma, by the way. The word trauma in Greek translates to the word wound. So trauma is a wound. Trauma is a wound, right? Before we even get into more of like the nitty gritty, it's really important for us to know that trauma is deeply personal and deeply contextual, meaning trauma is not always universal to everybody. Getting hit by a car, yeah, that's universally traumatizing, but there may be situations that someone can't even remember that to you can't get out of your head. So I want to validate that first, that not everyone has to agree on your trauma for your trauma to be trauma, right? It's about your internal experience. It's about how your body, your mind, your spirit, your nervous system reacted to the moment. And when we deny our trauma because other people don't agree with it, it doesn't help us heal, right? So big caveat there. I like to tell people that trauma is a past wound that affects how we show up in the present and how we perceive the future. I'll say that again. It's a past wound that affects how we show up in the present and how we perceive the future, right? So maybe someone used to make fun of, I'll talk about my own trauma. I've practiced it with my therapist. I'm okay. But growing up, I used to get made fun of a lot for being African, having dark skin, right? It was something that happened in the past, but in my early 20s, it affected how I showed up. I didn't like taking pictures. I felt self-conscious. I always felt like, man, I just don't feel very pretty. And the future orientation was like, no one's going to want me. No one's going to want to marry me. No one's going to want to date me. Why? And then when people did want like to date me or were attracted to me, it was like, no, you're not. It's not possible. Like, I just am so ugly, right? And there was this past wound, right, that was living with me in the present, affected how I showed up in the present, but also affected how I saw myself in the future, how I saw my life, my relationships, all of that, right? So as we get started thinking through, do I have trauma? That's a great place to start. What is something that happened in the past that affects how I show up today and also affects how I interact with people or anticipate I'll interact with people in the future? Some phrases that often come up when you've experienced trauma is, I'll never do that again, right? That doesn't mean that the moment was trauma, but it often comes up. Or ever since that day, I blank, right? Again, that could be positive. Ever since that day, I made sure to always pay it forward and pay for someone's Starbucks, right? It doesn't mean every phrase that uses those terms was something that was traumatic, but that's something I often see is like, ever since that day, I decided I was never going to let anyone know how I was really doing. I was never going to let anyone get close, right? Trauma isolates us in the moments that we're trying to escape. It isolates us emotionally in the moments we're trying to escape. And we also know that we're experiencing trauma when we're reliving the same situation and the same principle over and over again in different settings, with different people, and in different places. Why? Because our brain lives in a loop, meaning our brain becomes fixated on the very thing that we're afraid of. And I love this phrase, we steer where we stare. If I'm driving and I'm looking over here, I'm likely to steer over here. But what happens when over here is my trauma? What happens when over here is abandonment? Well, I'll be subconsciously drawn to moments of abandonment because I'm trying to resolve a past pain in the present, right? Our brain loves resolution. And when you're trying to resolve a past pain in the present, it's not always conscious. You're not like, you know what? This person abandoned me, so I'm going to find somebody who abandons me as well in the present. No, actually what happens is your brain finds someone who embodies the same traits as that person, thinking oftentimes, I get a second chance at this. Maybe this time I'll earn their love, right? And so it has very often has nothing to do with the person in front of you and everything to do with the person you have unresolved feelings towards. Another thing that trauma does that can be confusing for some people is trauma desensitizes us to the warning signs. Trauma desensitizes us to the warning signs. To what? To the warning signs of the situations we ended up in. If somebody only wants to come over when you're giving away free stuff, just making this up off the top of my head, that might be a warning sign that they're more interested in your stuff than they are in friendship with you, right? But when you've experienced trauma, you have become desensitized to that warning sign. So someone might only come over when you have something to offer and you're like, yeah, they're a great friend. And then when you stop offering stuff, they dip out. And then all of a sudden you're like, how did I end up here again? Well, you were desensitized to the warning signs, which is why resolving trauma requires connection. Why? Because you need a second set of eyes. You can be, and you probably are, too close to see. You are too close to see. If I stick my hand close enough to my face, I won't know it's a hand. It's blurry, right? And a lot of us, when we have wounds, we can say this was wounding, but that doesn't mean we can see how we got to the wound. That doesn't mean we can see how we're reliving the wound. That doesn't mean that we can see how we're interacting, how we are even perpetuating environments that keep us reliving and re-traumatized in those wounding moments that deep down we want to escape from, right? So when you are experiencing the same situation in different cities with different people, but it's the same situation at its core, then that often means there's something we're contributing to it. Now, I don't say that to shame you. I say that to say that is normal when you have trauma. I can't tell you how many people I've served who are just like, I thought it was normal to like have someone make fun of you and call you a friend. That is not normal, right? When we're in trauma, we're living in this alternate reality. My husband likes to say we're living with ghosts. Like we're living with the spirit of other people and the people in front of us, right? We're looking for the traits of that person who hurt us in the past, and we're seeing it in the people in front of us, right? Trauma is relational, and so it has to be healed relationally. Relational pain is healed relationally, right? We can isolate to get perspective and to get distance for sure, but like at the full actualization of healing is the ability to reintegrate into relationships again and feel safe as ourselves with the people in front of us. So at the core of healing is being present and being aware. And at the core of trauma is being absent from the present because you're reliving the past, right? So I want you to ask yourself, what moments do I relive over and over again? What moments do I relive? Like, do I keep on ending up in friendships where I'm abandoned? Do I keep on ending up in friendships where I have to cut it off? Do I keep on ending up in jobs where I start doing really well and then I burn out? Do I keep on ending up isolated? What is the thing that keeps happening? What's the wound that's reoccurring? Because the wound that's reoccurring is often tied to like this past original wound that needs to be healed and resolved and processed, right? Process is another word that we hear a lot. People are like, oh, like process your trauma, process. What does it mean to really process your trauma? You're processing your trauma, which I think can happen individually and needs to happen with another set of eyes, expert eyes, I would say, but also community as well. Processing anything is about reviewing the information and talking through and acknowledging the lived reality of the experience you had, while also discussing how that lived reality might affect you and your relationships, right? If I'm processing is like, when's the first time I felt this way? Where do I feel this in my body? When do I feel the need to isolate? When do I feel the need to overcompensate? When this happened, what did it make me believe about myself? What did it make me believe about others? Where do I feel safe? Where do I not feel safe because of the situation, right? So processing is really about, and I'll do another video on this, is really about getting curious. All healing requires curiosity. If you come into healing saying, I know what my trauma is, I know what's wrong, I know how it needs to be fixed, you've already lost. You've already forfeited healing, because I can't tell you how many times people have come in for burnout related to work, and it's tied back to childhood trauma of bullying, not tied to parents, not tied to family, but like simply to school stuff, right? I remember I was shocked when my trauma, when I was like, oh, this goes back to being bullied. Like, I cannot believe, right? Because in my 20s, I couldn't tell you, oh, I feel this way because I didn't have that language yet. But when I went into therapy, that helped me process like, oh, I have this ingrained automatic thought. And that's another place to go. What is the automatic thought that comes into your head when things don't go well? For everyone, it's different. For some people, it's like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. When's the first time someone's told you that or you felt that? Right? We're going back to go forward. We're not going back to like stay there. We're going back to get information, right? We're going back to the wound. We're going back to the trauma. It's like a wreckage site that still has valuable things that you need, valuable information. We're going back to parse through the things, to discard some things, and to hold on to some things, because the part of you that was wounded is the part of you that has the wisdom that you need to go forward. And that's why you're stuck. You're stuck here because you're not going back to get the wisdom from the wounded version of yourself, because that's needed for the journey, right? You need the wisdom of, I was always lovable, to keep going forward, to try something new, to take courage. You needed the wisdom of, that was their feelings and not a reflection of who I am. You need that wisdom to be able to try something new, not do well at it, and not feel like it's the end of the world, right? So I realize for a lot of people, we just throw out the word trauma and we assume people know what we're talking about. We throw out the phrase like processing emotions and we just assume like, oh, you know what we're talking about. But I wanted to kind of like slow down a little bit, take some time, share with you guys some processing questions like I did before, and talk through, okay, how do I know if I have trauma? So based on this, do you feel like you have trauma? And if so, what do you think it is? So if you love this conversation, and I hope that you did, and I hope it was helpful, well, I have a treat for you. I am partnering with an organization called Kinship. Kinship is a digital platform that is amazing for community and connection. It has talks just like this by experts just like me. Yes, I'm on the Kinship app too. And you get to listen to the talk and then have a conversation with people who want to talk about the same things as you. We process the same conversation we all listen to. And you get to build community in a way that's safe, comfortable, and helps you grow and gets some eyes on your stuff so that you can heal as well. You get 1 free month of Kinship if you use my code KOBE, K-O-B-E. So you go to ourkinship.com/KOBE, K-O-B-E for 1 free month. You guys make sure to use it. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Talk to me a little bit about what came up for you in this episode. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.